You're listening to Discography Discussion, episode 169, Kittie, with Isla Medlin of I Am Artworks.
Oh yeah, my name's Bork the Orc. How's it going today? Oh, I can read your mood, whatever you like. I can change Oh, this is too much talk. I can be quiet.
Hosted by Dan Terry.
It's all performance art, really. I cannot be at that level. She's on fire. I am.
And Joseph Wren. White wall plaster, never catch on. Presented by discussmetal.com. And if you think the President of the United States have a kitty on their foot and they really want to touch it, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe. That is Dan. Isla Medlin is here from I Am Artworks.
This is, I'm sorry, I'm still reeling from whatever that intro meant. Something about a president. I thought you were going to go in more of like a we shouldn't drink bleach or shine flashlights inside of our body, ultraviolet rays. I thought you were going to go that direction. I'm kind of glad that you didn't, but here we are, man. We're talking about Kittie. It's New Metal May, and it's kind of weird throwing Kittie in there because Kittie was new metal on like their first album. But as we kind of went through last year, the question really is more of, is it New Metal May? ?
Oh, it's definitely new metal, dude. It's got the low droning rhythm guitar beef, and then the vocal style is, well, whatever band you want to listen to at the time. Is it Guano Apes? Sometimes it is. Is it just old school black metal where it's not even a sound, it's a shriek? It's that too.
I think that's fair. Isla is joining us from... You're in Seattle still, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm in Seattle, Washington. Gray all the day. Social distancing is really easy out here, you guys. Nobody wants to be around each other.
See, I get really sad because if I get low on my quota of hugs every day, I kind of start to lose all sense of mymyself. So
is that why you have 4 kids?
The mystery is now solved. Been the answer the whole time.
Actually, people used to just say the reason I have 4 kids is because we didn't have a TV, which is objectively untrue, but still very funny. because we all know that, like, you know, the ultimate way to entertain yourself is just to watch TV. There's literally nothing else in the entire world that you can do.
Oh my god!
other than watch TV. But you know, here we are. So, I lost my train of thought, Joe. I need your intro support here.
You got it.
Long day.
Well, before we bust out the D20 and all die lucky, I'm going to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, then you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher. So if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening, and now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
Well, we do love 5-star reviews here on Discography Discussion. I love them a lot because they make me feel better, and my self-esteem is like always at the bottom of a well. And so you guys are always that bucket of fresh water that comes up from that well for me every day. But, one thing that really makes me happy is when you guys share the episodes. Sharing the episodes is probably the best thing that you can do for our podcast because, Grandma might be bored during lockdown and she might want to hear whether or not a band that she probably doesn't even listen to is good or not. And we're here to provide that for her. But she's not going to ever be able to hear that unless you share it. So hit that share button. And I just want to thank everybody that has hit it recently.
And now Isla's going to tell us all about I Am Artworks, Die Lucky, D&D podcast. Did I miss anything?
Yep, that's it. That's the stuff that I'm doing right now. So I Am Artworks is my brand studio, basically, my production company. And then Die Lucky is an illustrated real play Dungeons and Dragons project that uses direct cuts from my D&D game, original music, and illustrations to tell the story of Sarai. It's set in a really highly magical setting, and it has a lot of homebrew mechanics, including really dire consequences if you die, which is why it's called Die Lucky. Basically, if you die in Sarai, you have a luck check that you have to do to see if you can be resurrected at all. Where am I in my copy? bragging about my copy, and then I can't find my spot.
It's okay, Isla. I can't read either, and you know why.
But yeah, so we're on YouTube, and you can find us by searching Die Lucky Campaign. We don't have one of those fancy URLs yet because we don't have enough followers. So help us out with that, guys. Go and follow and like my stuff.
It's easy. All you have to do is click a button. It's awesome. But one of the things that I think is really unique about this too is the animation aspect of it, because there's a ton of role playing based podcasts out there, and so whenever you start one, very similar to starting a music podcast, people are always like, well, what are you going to bring to your table that somebody else isn't already doing and probably doing better than you're going to be doing starting out? And I think this is cool because for somebody like me, I don't have a whole lot of imagination, so whenever I'm listening to something like that, because a lot of buddies of mine listen to podcasts that are all just D&D sessions, and I just can't get through them in an audio medium. And so I think having the visual aspect of it is really cool and really fun. And for me, it makes it more like I'm actually there at the table, and I don't have to imagine things because you're imagining them for me. And so that's cool.
I love hearing that. That's brand praise, because that's kind of where I'm at with it, is that I think that the art aspect of Die Lucky is going to be the thing that kind of sets us apart from everyone else, because everyone at my table is really new to playing tabletop. So one of the things we say almost every episode once we really get rolling is we're learning. So the whole project is a lot of the amount of stuff that I cut that is just us talking at the table to explain how rules work is just astronomical. So it's like anybody can play D&D, anybody can get into a game. The thing that I'm trying to bring that's extra is the animation and illustration aspect. And I don't want other animators to go to Die Lucky and then get mad at me. It is very lightly animated. Lightly animated. I don't want to pretend to your audience or anybody that I'm producing a full-fledged cartoon. But it's certainly it's a visually assisted Dungeons and Dragons podcast, I think.
It's kind of like motion comic almost in a way, and that's the thing that I like about it, because it's able to still keep you on the content without taking over. And maybe I didn't explain that well before, that it's not like full 60 frames a second animation. You know what I mean? Like a straight up fantasy epic that you're going to watch play out on your computer screen. But it's definitely, it's very visually assisted, and I love that aspect of it. And I think it's fun. I think the personalities are all different enough. And
that was something we actually thought about when I was essentially casting my D&D table. I had to pull people that had very distinct voices, because I'm a huge D&D podcast fan, and I do listen to D&D podcasts, but I've never been able to really get into, oh God, I'm going to get dragged. Drag me. I've never gotten super into the audio Critical Role podcast. I can watch it on YouTube and have a great time, but if I'm listening, Matt Mercer and one of the players sound too similar, even when they're doing their voices. I can't. So literally one of my when I was looking for people to play at my table, I turned somebody down because their voice sounded too much like someone who was absolutely on the docket.
Right.
So
that's rough.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. We have a weird recording schedule, and it's a big commitment. That's something that I had to do at the top too, was get everybody's permission to record them and figure out how they wanted to be credited, and just be this is a game for you guys, but know that I'm gonna it's a business for me.
Right.
I'm doing it's a project for me, so I'm super committed, and I'm not gonna bail on you guys. And if you guys do need to bail, please do it one at a time.
and if this goes viral, it's and if this goes viral for some reason, I'm collecting all of the ad revenue because I did all the work. Yeah.
We did talk about that beforehand, because I set up the Patreon to launch the day that the trailer launched, just because best laid intentions and all that. And we all talked about it, and I was kind of mousy and sheepish about it, being guys, so I get that you're the cast of this, but if the Patreon gets money, I'm going to use that to plug back into our game. And every one of my players was there's no question, if Patreon gets money, buy your groceries.
Right.
So
man, I don't get to buy my groceries with Patreon money. I should have thought this through a lot better.
Yeah, so,
me, I owe Joe tons of money on the computer that I probably need to send that. Like,
well, now that you bring it up,
yeah, absolutely.
It's the end of the month.
It's recorded and accountable.
Yep. Well, and the reason we had you on the podcast, number one, not only to promote, but also just because I think it was fun because when we were talking about doing an episode together, we kind of went back and forth on what bands we were going to talk about, and we kind of landed on Kittie. And I remember at first being skeptical because I was like, man, I don't really know Kittie that well. I've always kind of liked the songs that I'd heard. But I remember them being a totally different band than what they kind of became. And so that was the really interesting part for me, was that I was like, wow, these, well, I can't say these guys, but like these ladies were much more aggressive than I had given them credit for growing up. As I grew up listening to metal and hardcore, therefore, this may be a secret to some people. It may not be a secret to some people. Female fronted or female led bands are typically not given very much of their own day in the sun. And Kittie is one of those bands that, if you haven't been listening to them, you probably have no idea what you're in store for.
Oh my God, true.
You want to dive into it?
Ready.
All right. Locked
and loaded.
2000 Spit.
Oh, man. Okay. Oh, you mean the album title? Okay. So it's interesting. So the main reason why we put Kittie on New Metal May is because of this album. Like 100%. Whenever I went into this thing, I was like, man, first of all, somebody really, 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 really upset these people. Like they're very angry, and which is not, and I mean that, like, that's not me being like, oh, it's loud, it's heavy, so it must be angry. There's tons of bands that aren't angry but are still super brutal. But Kittie was different in the sense that their music actually sounds angry. Like, it's not like I'm up on stage growling, doing a voice. It's I'm super pissed off about this, and I'm going to hammer it out in the most animalistic way that I can.
Yeah, I agree. Like, and that's what actually drew me to Spit, like that first album, as a like young angsty femme person, like just being so mad and feeling like nobody would listen unless I was screeching in that like guttural sense, you know, like that's what got me into Kittie in the first place. Like I realized, like, after like agreeing to do this, that I had only really listened to maybe their first 3 albums, but like the only heavy rotation one I had was Spit, and it does things to me. Like, I spent a half an hour crying this morning. I don't know why. Everything was just emotional. So it's probably because I listened to Kittie for like 3 days.
It can have that effect. And the weird thing is like it having that effect on me is, I mean, I didn't cry, but because I didn't have time. I was super busy.
To clarify, I am a crier. Like, I cry when I'm happy, mad, sad. If I'm high emotion, it's cry.
I don't cry that much because ever since I was a little kid, I was taught that if I cried, then I was showing weakness to people. So, you know, it's that sort of thing I've had to deal with. The persecuted white male, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, like this one really struck me because, like, so I have to put on my music critic hat a little bit here, and with Spit, because it is a record. It's probably the only Kittie album that I had really heard before we did this episode. And so that's all I had as a reference point. And I was like, Kittie, okay, they were that band that sounded kind of like Deftones, with the girl screaming, you know, over all of it. And I think that in a certain sense, that description does it a bit of a disservice. However, if I'm being music critic, Dan, there's definitely things about Spit that are not like super polished. The riffing, like the actual guitar tone, I noticed is just a straight lift from Deftones. It sounds so much like Deftones that I'm expecting to hear Chino come in at any moment with his like smooth, you know, croony voice. But we don't get that here. There is clean singing, and the clean singing is probably, from a musical standpoint, is probably the best part of it as far as technical ability goes, she has a great voice. She sings really well, but like it's not over the top. It's not, operatic and anthemic or whatever. It just sounds like a real person singing, but they're just not doing it like badly, which most of the heavy bands that we talk about, they have clean vocals, but they're usually pretty bad, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have been able to like fall into Kittie at all if they didn't have that pretty sounding. Like I like my fair share of metal and hard bands, but they usually have certain aspects that like have to be present, or I feel like I'm an old lady and I'm like, I feel nervous. This music is making me nervous. And specifically, we'll get into this more later, but like with Kittie's stuff, I feel like if I am not aware at the top of my brain of what the lyrical content is, I'm missing a huge piece of the experience of of any of their music, because like the screaming comes in almost always at a point of like frustrated release or yelling. Like it's timed to the story of each song, it seems like to me. Like, does that make sense? I don't know if that, like, I've listened to a lot of your episodes and I know that this is not something you guys usually talk about. I haven't
lyrics?
No. I'm just saying, like, as in this way of like digesting a song. Like, I went to art school, guys. We'll go there from here.
Okay.
So like as an art piece, as a full experience, and not just a song, like that kind of art school nonsense.
No, I get you. And like I'm not that articulate when it comes to talking about some of this stuff, because I mean, like when I'm going through this record, I'm like, Spit is a banger, Brackish is a banger, Raven's a banger, Choke's a banger, like that's the way I really can digest this record. I love the passion behind it, even though the screaming vocals, like I've talked a lot about how the singing is so good, but the screaming vocals are for lack of a better word, are not that good. They're very but like I was talking to Isla earlier this week about how even though the vocals aren't like great, like technique wise, and it actually sounds like it's really bad for her the way she's screaming like that, because like I tried screaming like that for years, where it was like an amplified shout, like you're just yelling. It's not a growl, it's not a it doesn't have that like that phlegm in it or whatever. It's just yelling, literally yelling at the top of your lungs and basically opening up your false vocal cords and letting out this roar. And I feel like that really is what creates the emotional impact in a lot of these songs, because it's not refined, it's not beautiful. A lot of bands that have heavy vocals they're just doing a voice right. On stage they're doing their best impression of a scary voice, their monster voice or whatever. And I think that's cool, but sometimes that can take the emotional aspect out of it. And so with this record in particular, with Kittie, I kind of felt it the most, even though the music wasn't like, the heaviness of the music was not quite there for me. But I definitely appreciated what they had kind of established on this record.
Well, dude, you remember back in the early 2000s when nu metal was a combination of write the heaviest riff that you could with just do whatever song idea comes to mind. Even if it doesn't make any sense, you can still play a clean guitar and have a semi-melodic song. Doesn't in any way come off as like a classic thrash song or a melodic metal or hardcore that we would get 5 years after that. I listened to this, and we're talking about Cold Chamber again. It's like everybody just got in a room and made loud, heavy songs that made sense. It didn't have to be overthought. It didn't have to be overproduced. This is just what they came up with. And the reality of the songs is that actual people are playing these songs together.
I can get down for that. Like, I specifically with this, like with Spit, like I feel like most of the things that they are lacking in finesse, they are at least somewhat making up for in raw, uncut feeling. Like because those places where the screaming and growling does fall apart and not necessarily reach the level of produced that they get to on their later albums, I'm not sure that it's like really a disservice to the track that it's on, because like, again, lyrically, like what's happening in a lot of the tracks on this album is from a place of frustration.
I know this album came out in 2000, but for better or worse, it's a 90s record from the guitar tone standpoint and the instrumentation. So my favorite thing about 90s records is how raw they sound, because maybe the producer knows how to record the band, but the band wasn't like a Metallica who could spend a year and millions of dollars in the studio making every single note sound quote-unquote perfect. We can record you and make you sound good, but it's up to you guys to lay down the performance. But we get that raw, grunge, almost Melvins-like explosion of just heavy. Even when it's being quiet, it's still being heavy.
I think it like the Deftones thing can't be ignored too much, because I think that they borrow a lot from Deftones on this record. And I think it actually works a little bit better, especially if you look at how immature the lyrics were for Deftones at that time and compare them to the lyrical maturity of Kittie. Deftones is like at a 1 out of 10 on maturity, 10 being the most mature. Deftones is at like a 1 here. Kittie's at like a 3. You know what I mean? So like it's a little bit more mature. And I might just be saying that because the lyrical content is very different. A lot of the, let's just be real here. A lot of the music coming out at this time, we had stuff like Korn, we had stuff like Deftones, obviously Slipknot, Cold Chamber. A lot of these bands are falling into the trap of like, it's this weird like victimization mindset that they have, where they're just constantly being picked on, but then like on the next song they're like trying to be super tough. There was always kind of that weird dichotomy of like, okay, are you a victim or are you an aggressor? I really can't tell. And right. With Kittie, I always felt like they didn't really have that dichotomy where it was like, dude, we're an all-female band in a genre of people that are just not going to listen to us just because of that. And so
and not just that, but they're also like really like again, like lyrically they're speaking to a specifically femme experience, like I can't like throw that kind of like, oh man, come at me. But I can't throw that kind of like huge like blanket over things. But like I always felt like my dude friends that liked metal and didn't like Kittie, specifically didn't like Kittie just because they were a group of femme.
Totally.
Even if you sit down with dude bro and try to explain to him, no man, like Paper Doll is about like living your whole life under the thumb of somebody who's sexually abusing you, and then you finally have the guts to like stand up to him and yell at him. Dudes don't want to have that conversation.
Right, but the song "Daddy" by Korn is fine.
Right.
That's
and super emotional thing. And way serious.
And I can relate to a certain degree. I mean, I grew up listening to Christian metal bands, which is kind of the same sort of thing. People aren't going to listen to it just because of that, Right. It just throws a bad taste in everyone's mouth for basically no reason. Like a lot of those bands were just as good as any other bands that were out there, but because they had this tag, and I think even. And I'll even go ahead and say it. It probably was more controversial for them to be a female band singing about female things, more so even than like the Christian bands, because like they at least had a certain amount of the demographic already on their side,
Right.
But yeah, so like this record, I felt like they did come in really hard, and I do feel like especially with the lyrics and the aggression that goes into it, I think they were trying to prove something. They were trying to prove that they could basically, for lack of a better word, rock as hard as anybody else. And I think they largely succeeded. Whenever I say that the screaming vocals aren't great, that's purely coming from me in 2020.
Oh yeah, I get that it's
it's
a production thing, not a
It's a skill thing. She just wasn't there yet.
Yeah, she just wasn't there yet. Like,
yeah, I mean, you guys all heard me scream at high school talent shows. Like, I wasn't there yet either for a long time, And
I can play that for the listener now if you want.
I'd prefer if you didn't. That only goes to the Patreon subscribers at the $50 a month mark. that must mean that they already love me. So they're not going to judge me, or probably.
Hey man, if my stuff takes off, I'm like not looking forward to the day that everybody figures out where the links to me as the lead in the middle school musical are. I'm not looking forward to that.
That would be incredible.
Why do I feel like I'm going to get an accusation at some point?
It's going to happen.
I know it exists somewhere. They share it on Facebook.
Fuck.
So they put out Spit, and perfectly serviceable record. But I gotta say, the amount of growth that they have between Spit and Oracle is outrageous to me.
Oh,
2001.
Yeah. Totally different sound.
Oh. And it's 2001, so in a weird way, like they have completely crossed over. Because I'm a metalcore guy. This record basically punches new metal to the side and says, okay. And Morgan even says in an interview with some magazine, I don't know, I don't feel like looking that quote up, but she essentially says they were basically kids when they wrote their first record, which again kind of backs up what Joe was saying about it being a 90s record. It was very much written in that mindset. Whenever you get into the 2000s, though, she says, when we wrote the first record, we were listening to Nirvana and Alice in Chains. She's like, now we listen to Cannibal Corpse and Nile.
Right. Well, and also they got together in gym class in high school. So all of these parallels to that first album feeling like high school angst are not off base.
Yeah, you can definitely feel it, especially in the lyric. The lyrics take a huge step up on Oracle.
Yeah.
We're finally getting lyrics from a person that's a little bit more relatable. I think the lyrics on Spit are great because they remind me of a time in my life when I felt that way.
Yeah, it's nostalgia crack.
Yeah. And so now that I'm older, I'm like, wow, this didn't age well. But yeah, this record is just, for lack of a better term, I mean, it's brutal.
100%.
It's much more brutal than I was expecting. And when I was talking trash about the vocals on the previous record, this is 1000% much more up my alley. Vocally, she's got that snarl, or as I it's no secret who my favorite band is, but she's got that Zao snarl on this one, and that's that is absolutely what I am into 100%. Take my money, that is, I don't care if it's a dude or, I don't care if it's a dude singing or a girl singing. If you make that sound, you got my $10, and, oh my goodness. To me personally, this record is what must have been how they felt whenever they were playing the songs off of Spit.
Yeah, I see.
But this is the modernized. But this is the modernized version of that. This is we pull out all the stops. We're listening to death metal now. We're listening to all these heavy bands. And for 2001, this crosses over pretty well into the metalcore sound to me. It's still a little bit new metal, especially with the choruses. They never dropped the clean vocals, which is probably the smartest thing they could do considering how extreme they go.
Yeah, but they did pull back on them a lot. Like I said, at the start of this, I had mostly only listened to Spit and Oracle, but Oracle wasn't nearly in as much rotation for me because of the less new metal vibe, I guess. Yeah.
Hey, it's okay. It's 2020. New metal's cool again, so we can talk about it.
It's I'm allowed to like that, right, guys?
Yeah, totally. You should check out my friends in the Roach Coach podcast. All they talk about is new metal.
I have listened to a couple of episodes after I heard them do a guest over here. So
you're welcome.
There's just so much Dungeons and Dragons podcasts out there that I have to, and that's research,
Right, it is. I get it. I mean, Roach Coach is probably the only other music podcast I listen to, just because they're different enough from us for me not feel like I'm ripping off. But that's a whole nother thing. We're talking about Oracle.
Oracle. Why don't we stay on track and I'll lead us back in?
All right, brother. You can lead us back in. Go right ahead.
Sorry, I'm easily distracted.
God, don't we know it?
Same.
I mean, we at some point we got to point out that I'm the chuckle fuck that said that Deadsy sounded like oh God, Blue Monday?
Orgy.
Orgy, yeah. I'm like, specifically Blue Monday.
The vocals do. The vocal production's the same.
Well, because I started listening to this podcast with the Deadsy one, and I heard a shout out to me with no name, and was like, yeah, that's all accurate. I still stand behind what I said when I was
being
16.
super nice. I didn't say your name. I was being super nice.
No, you couldn't. Yeah, it's fine. But it's all great. I'm outing myself. This was in my notes of things that I had to do while I was here.
Well, I will let the people on the Deadsy Reddit who love that episode, I will let them know
that they should check out my podcast.
They should check out your podcast, and that you've learned since then. Yeah.
To be more specific in my similes.
Right.
Anyway, all right. So yeah, Oracle.
Oracle is a cosmetically, audibly, everything about this record is better than Spit. I don't like this record more than Spit, but everything's better. I think this one turns it from a nu metal band into just a heavy metal band with fucking black metal, shrieking death growls. Everything about this is just heavier, and I love it. It's
definitely more brutal, and it, like, again, so if anybody's like not checking out this band because like out of some sort of weird macho man mentality, and that's something that, like, that's a common theme of the podcast. I'm not just saying this stuff because Isla's here. I think it's been a pretty common thread throughout our 100,000 episodes that we've done. I've always said I really don't like tough guy music that much. I like heavy music, I like brutal music, but I don't like music where like I start flashing back to some kid that was picking on me in high school and that's the band, you know. Like I'm just not into that, and it makes me a little bit nervous. It makes me feel like less of a man.
I think you just gave me an aha moment about my own taste. Just
yeah,
like.
Well, fair enough. You got that one for free.
Yeah, I'm only at a loss for words because I'm like might be having a small stroke. It's fine. Keep going.
It's all good. Just keep talking. Keep drinking beer. It's fine.
It'll be fine.
It'll be fine at the end. But yeah, like this record is absolutely so much more mature. I like the concept, of an oracle. Morgan says, an oracle speaks the truth and foresees the future. And this really, I mean, it's very aptly named because Oracle draws a line in the sand immediately and says, we are not going to do what we did before. There's not going to be like, they're not going to throw on some Deftonesy groove riff, throw some clean singing on it, and then have a little bit of shouting on top of it after, which they did a little too much, I think, on Spit. But this record was very much like, I think Spit was like, look at how heavy we are, look at how aggressive we are, and we're an all-female band. That's a got 'em, all of that stuff. This record was more like, okay, this is us trying to present what we feel like is our version of metal to the world.
And at that point, they had kind of at least somewhat shown that they could yell. Like,
totally.
Like, the point has been proven. We can yell. Let's do things with the yelling in addition to...
Well, and that's the thing. They're not yelling on this record. They're growling.
That's
I love that stuff, man. Like the first time I ever heard a growling band, like specifically the first time I heard Zayo, I mean, it was like love at first listen, just hearing that snarling voice, because to me, I always felt like shouting's cool, but shouting is superhuman. And that is an appeal to a record like Spit. But for me, it's the inhuman growls, the stuff that whenever you put it on, people are immediately like, that is satanic. That is the stuff that just gets me going. And like everybody knew that in 2003, 2004, bands like As Lay Dying and Killswitch Engage, kind of made the metalcore thing like really popular. And it became like the go-to style for people that used to listen to nu metal, but won't admit that they ever did. And here's Kittie in 2001, 3-4 years before all that, and they've got the brutal riffs, they've got the breakdowns, they've got the growls, they've got all, but they also have the clean singing. And so it's weird to me that this record isn't remembered with more reverence than it is, just because it laid down the foundations for a lot of stuff that was going to become popular just a couple years later.
I think that might be, for me as a listener, the song that like hits me from this album is probably either What I Always Wanted or Safe. And yeah. I'm not sure that those tracks are like as the noteworthy tracks that are something like special to me. I don't know that those are the big market tracks, the things that are gonna get the Deftones guys to like dabble back over into here or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know what the singles were for any of this, or if that's even how metal shit goes anyway.
Well, the weird thing about Kittie has been that Canadian band, which I don't think we mentioned before, but they were never they weren't signed to like Interscope Records or Epic Records or Atlantic or Universal or any of that. All of Kittie's stuff has been released on like independent record labels. Like they have always had kind of a very do-it-yourself kind of vibe to them anyway.
I think that might be another reason why I really connect with them.
Yeah. Well, sure. I mean, like as podcasters, we're all very DIY, like if you can't relate to that, like what are we even doing here? You know what I mean? Like that's the sort of thing too. That's how this record is able to be so heavy, so brutal, but also like still do well because they were a band that got notoriety just for being good versus a band that maybe just got a good record deal,
right?
Or whatever, and I think they had a lot more control over their musical output. If anybody cares, the singles for this record were What I Always Wanted and Run Like Hell.
Oh, I was surprised.
Yeah, it definitely was like Pink Lemonade. Nobody has time for that.
Yeah, nobody has time for that. Oh my god.
That's the only downside to the record, because one thing that I was going to compliment Kittie for is the records are very brief, and I enjoy that, especially when I only have like a week or two to listen to all of them. So with this record, this one clocks in at about 47 minutes long, which is a little long for me, but not too bad. But the rest of their stuff is like 35, 36 minutes, which I think is kind of a sweet spot for heavy music.
But isn't Pink Lemonade alone 10 minutes long?
Correct. Yeah. So basically what you have a regular Kittie album plus a Pink Floyd cover, and then you've got Pink Lemonade thrown on at the end. And it's definitely not my favorite Kittie song by any means. It's not terrible. It's not great, but 10-minute songs typically just do not have a place in my heart.
Fair. That's, yeah. It's like I don't want to be negative about anything because like I do love the band. But yeah, that was I think that was the track that was on where my partner was like laying in the bed across the room and rolled over and was like, babe, this has to stop. Like he's like, it's been fine, but like this, can you come back to this one? And I'm like, I'll put headphones in. It's fine, babe. I love you.
Turn it off. Yeah.
Just like this has to stop.
I don't hear the metalcore in this one. I hear a lot of 90s punk rock, nu metal, black metal, and even some old school Black Sabbath style blues, because let's be honest, that's what Black Sabbath was way back when. Just because they played slow doesn't mean it wasn't heavy as hell. I don't hear the As I Lay Dying 2004 that you say is coming. I hear everything before that.
Well, you know what? Let me dig into that a little bit. Let's rip that scab right off for a second, because I love talking about metalcore so much. In 2001, yeah, metalcore doesn't sound like As I Lay Dying. It doesn't sound like. Actually, it's funny. As I Lay Dying's first album is a total ripoff of Zao, like almost like direct lifts. I digress. But you have to look at what metalcore was in 2001. It was a mixture of heavy metal, or I'm sorry, more of a mixture of like the death metal and grindcore mixed with hardcore punk. And this record has all of that. It's got that groove metal. I hear little notes of Pantera in here. I hear a little bit of groove, but what I hear mostly is a band that listened to Cannibal Corpse and is like, okay, we can't do that.
Well, maybe we could do more of that.
Right. It's like we can't do that, because if we do that, we're going to lose everyone.
Right.
You know, like any chance we had of being, a band that people listen to would go severely down the toilet. So, so you still have those clean vocals in there, but the actual musical approach is very much in line with a lot of the earlier metalcore bands out there at the time, like Zao, like even early Shadows Fall was very much like that. But the reason I'm saying that it kind of resembles kind of more of what Killswitch and As I Lay Dying would come to do. Sure, they're not playing Gothenburg riffs. They're not playing like Swedish death metal influenced stuff here. This is all actually very American. It's very patriotic in a weird way. even though they're from Canada. But it's very American influenced. So it doesn't have any of that weird Swedish stuff that all those bands would rip off. But I guess what I meant by that statement was more that they were a band that took the aggressiveness of death metal and hardcore punk and even a little bit of nu metal. Sure, they still had a little bit of that. But they were able to incorporate it into their pre-existing sound. And so they're singing choruses and they've got a lot of cleans. Metalcore bands in 2000 and 2001 did not have clean vocals. So I'm basically saying that they took those ingredients, added a little bit of like melody to it, and that was what took off like wildfire like 2-3 years later.
And I don't think it's a lack of skill. They don't sound like a group of people that are learning how to play their instruments and started a band. They sound like they're playing a pace that they have set. And they're not even playing a slow nu metal pace. It's very unique to Kittie. The attitude and the tone of the record is very much paced.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It's a far... I don't know how I want to say this. It's
Take your time. It's not live.
Yeah, it's not live. We can cut everything.
It's not? Shit.
Oh, man, we've been streaming this to Instagram the whole time. That's
Oh, man, that camera quality. But yeah, no, I feel like it's definitely... I feel like the difference between this album and the first album is I could play Spit in my room and my mom probably would like hear the more melodic stuff and be okay, but like there wasn't enough, or not even... that implies something, but there wasn't as much of that on the second album. So I feel like my mom would have been was more concerned when I was playing Oracle. Does that track?
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I grew up with conservative Christian parents. So like, I mean,
I know.
If you're, let's put it this way. If your mom was uncomfortable, there was probably good reason to be uncomfortable. You know, like, like as an adult, I get it, like 100%. But like, yeah, I mean, that record was just absolutely a huge step forward for the band, and I have no complaints.
This is not a complaint. I want to clarify that this is not like my mom not wanting me to listen to it is not a complaint.
It's a benefit when you're a teenager, you know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and you got to stick it to the man however you can, even if it's not a man. That's what this whole thing's about, right?
My mom was a drill instructor. She was always the man.
Well, let's talk about what you just said there, Dan. I think Oracle is a metal record that's designed by female artists. There is an entirely different approach to any type of art depending on your personality and how you perceive the world around you and how the world around you affects you. So if I'm sitting down trying to learn how to write cursive, my handwriting is shit. Whereas my mom is going to say, take your time, get it right. So when I listen to Oracle, it's got that pace of, it doesn't have to be this fast to be heavy or this slow to be melodic. But if we do it right here and we keep it just a little bit above medium, it's going to have way more attitude than it has any business having, even when it slows down and paces itself.
Sure. No, and I still, like, that's my favorite Kittie album, probably flat out. Is Oracle, because it's still enough of a mix of the old and the new for me, and that's just new in EW, not in U.
Right.
But it's definitely one of those weird situations where I just felt like this was like they were never going to go heavier than this, but they do go more extreme, if that makes sense. So that's my weak attempt at a transition into the next record.
Are we ready to look so pretty? 2004, Until the End.
Ooh, okay. You know how I was, you know how I was talking about, okay. So you know how I was.
You want to try again there, Skippy?
This is me trying to be like really careful with how I phrase this. First of all, I do not think this is a bad album. And see, I bet you guys thought I was going to go there, but I wasn't. This is the year of metalcore. 2003, 2004. Dude, Azalea Dying, Lamb of God, you know, like all of these bands coming up out of the quote unquote underground. Everybody was signing bands like this at that time. And Kittie kind of decided that like, we don't really want to do that. I gotta give him credit. I didn't hear a single In Flames or Dark Tranquility riff on any of these songs. And that's a big deal for me. A really big deal. This is like Oracle, but they kind of, I feel like in the hard rock aspects, they double down on the hard rock, but also double down on the metal. So what you get, the super brutal songs are going to be outrageously brutal. Like you can't even like play them in front of other people without them thinking you have problems.
Right.
But then you've got more mainstream radio friendly songs like Into the Darkness, like so.
Oh man, I got feelings about Into the Darkness. Into the Darkness sounds like it's like, okay, so I got a YA novel that I want to make into like a TV movie, and we need metal music behind the like main character girl that falls in love with a vampire, but like it can't be too metal because it has to like appeal to the people in the middle of the country, but like we need something that's metal-ish. Like, and I'm
came from the Midwest, okay?
I know. And I'm specifically talking about the like In Dreams, like that one, that track. Like I felt like I was like back in high school listening to Kittie, reading L.J. Smith, Christopher Pike, like real strong vibes of like almost getting like into that hard place, like the music almost getting to that hard place, and like not like a lot like YA fiction actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Funny how that all goes together.
It pulls on those. It pulls on those super angsty heartstrings. And I think it's kind of cool that the band this late into their career was angsty as they were. I always feel like Kittie always felt like they needed to be like they're like okay, yeah, the last record it was super heavy. Let's throw some weird like black metal stuff into here.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to be expecting that. Like, all female band from Canada isn't going to play a black metal song. Oh, but we are. And you're not going to hear it.
They added in some aspects on this, like some, I guess we'll call it aspects. Like the layered chanting that happens a couple of times. Like I have that in my notes a lot. Like specifically, I have in my notes sugar in parentheses, pussy sugar. I really like the women chanting aspect. This fucking slaps. like I left a note for myself to actually work in some chanting into my own podcast loop music, because like Pussy Sugar was was a breath of fresh air, because I feel like the first couple of tracks on this are kind of a more repetitive slog for me, almost like even Red Flag kind of has like a backward build to me.
Sure. Well, and that's the whole thing, because like they wanted to come out swinging on this record, and they do that like 100%. I think the hard part about making extreme metal music for the most part is being interesting, like, and I think that's the hardest part, because like you can only go so hard before you become a wall of noise.
Yeah. And
they definitely start hitting the wall of noise level of heaviness on this record, but then it's almost like they feel bad about it. And then they slow it down a little bit. I don't want to say slow it down, but lighten it up a little bit and throw a lot more elements into it, a lot more interesting stuff. Like I love grindcore. I love stuff like Napalm Death. I love it. I love Cannibal Corpse. I love stuff like that. But like, I like it because it only makes one sound, and I just want to hear that sound for a half hour. But like with Kittie, for them, I'm always looking for kind of that deeper underlying current. Like, what is this making me have to think about? And how does it affect me on a personal level? And I got to admit, man, like with it being, because they've always stuck with like the femme mindset and all that. I'm not gonna lie, that's hard for me to relate to as a dude. But
welcome to the other side of the world, man. Right?
Yeah, like 100%. Because like can you imagine like being a woman listening? Can you imagine being a woman? But like
I don't know if I can, Dan. It's really hard.
Rough. Just so rough. Go on a journey here with me for a minute.
All right, I'm gonna close my eyes and I'm gonna imagine that I am a vagina carrying woman. All right, I'm in character. Got it.
If it makes you feel better, we're on a luck dragon during this.
Perfect.
So you're a girl listening to metal, and every single song is like, let's kill that bitch. You know what I mean? Like it's rough. And
it's a little hard.
We already talked about Coheed and Cambria, dude. Come on.
We did already talk about Coheed and Cambria. We did. That is a thing that we did. 10-speed bicycles. Anyway, but like that's rough. That's hard. And but what I appreciated about Kittie is that like I always felt like their music was more accessible to me as a dude. Like it's more than you think. Like going into it, it's definitely one of those like, hey, we're providing you with a different perspective. How about that? But it's never like, let's kill this dude. Maybe in spit a little bit, but like not. But like beyond that, like I appreciated. I guess I don't know how to say this without sounding like a jerk, but like I appreciated that they still appealed to me.
Yeah.
Even though they had no right or obligation to do so.
Yeah.
You know, and then like that's what I loved. It like. It's kind of nice being able to listen to their stuff and it be so heavy and it be so aggressive, but lyrically it's about like real feelings and like real stuff.
Yeah, man. Like this is the one I alluded to earlier. Like this is the album where I was like my first listen through, I didn't get into it as much, but like on my second listen through when I was actually like doing the lyric book reading nonsense.
It's not nonsense.
Into the Darkness. The first time I listened to it, I couldn't give a single shit about it. But like after like reading the lyrics and following, like wrecked me. It wrecked me the second time around, and is now probably as much of a banger for me as Sugar.
Sure.
Like even though
that song is not called Sugar. Come on.
Yeah, we know it's called Pussy Sugar on Spotify. On Spotify, it only says Sugar, but like when you go look up the lyrics, it's definitely Pussy Sugar.
We're an explicit podcast. It's fine. It's totally fine. But yeah, like the tracks 5, 6, and 7 is where, you know, like you said, Isla, like that's where the record kind of starts becoming less just heavy and more interesting.
Oh yeah, I mean 5, 6, and 7. Is that Red Flag? Does that start at Sugar?
It starts at Pussy Sugar and it ends with Into the Darkness.
Into the Darkness. I also. Oh yeah, right. It's this. Sugar comes right after Red Flag, which is that like backwards build I was talking about, where it sounds like that entire song has been constructed from the top down instead of the bottom up.
Yeah. Which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally. Once I realized that was what was happening, I had an appreciation.
Yeah, it's fine.
Which, I mean, for a song called Red Flag, that artistically makes sense.
Totally. And I like how creative it was too, because like, and this band is obviously, they've had a lot of kind of like lineup changes.
Yeah.
So I mean, by this record, it's not really the same Kittie that it was on Spit, and so I think some of the differences in the way the songs came together. I think at this point in their career, it was the best thing they could do to have kind of fresh blood in the band and have those newer ideas, because I think this record is awesome. I don't like it as much as Oracle, but I think it's just because of its similarities to Oracle, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There was an EP in between called Safe, but we don't talk about EPs on the show because I just don't even know what those are.
Because it's not safe.
I mean, I am gonna throw out there that I fucking love Safe. But.
Safe is a good EP. I'll throw that. I'll leave that. But like it's
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if this many episodes into it I have to explain it, but I do anyway. Just because some dude left me a really negative review one time because he said I missed a Glassjaw EP, and I was like,
we don't do EPs.
We don't do EPs, bro. And of course it said like bro, because I feel like nobody can really understand what I'm talking about unless I say bro. But like, yeah, Until the End is a great Kittie record, and I feel like in a certain sense it was kind of their last. How are we going to push ourselves forward?
Yeah.
How are we going to continue to be musically relevant?
Guys, I got it. Let's have a funeral for yesterday. 2007.
Could we not?
No, dude. We need an old school sounding 80s hair groove punk thing.
Direct from my notes. This is a very rocky rock album.
It's rock, man.
Rocky rock. It has the underlaying power chords, but they have pulled way back on the bass, both guitar bass and pedal bass.
So do you remember when I mentioned that this band had several old school metal characteristics, including but not limited to Black Sabbath? This is where I get the Sabbath from. I don't think it's bad. I just question the decision in 2007. But at the same time, they did the exact opposite of everything they've been doing on the past 3 records.
Yeah, there are synth riffs on this record, like full-on synthesizer that was just not present previously.
Which is great if you're Deadsy.
Yeah, and obviously I like Deadsy and synths and shit, but it was very, like I said, that was it just doesn't sound like Kittie.
No.
I
was just gonna let you guys. I was gonna let you guys just have this one. This is rough for me.
Dude, it was kind of rough for me. Like,
it killed my day, man. I was working.
It was not. I couldn't get through Funeral for Yesterday without the lyric sheets. Like, I couldn't. And this isn't a fatigue problem. This isn't I had been listening to all of it. This is, I would take breaks and try to go back. And I sound so negative right now. But
welcome to discography discussion.
And I don't want to sound, because I just want to stress hard enough in case Morgan stops by, listens in. I fucking love Kittie. Like, don't get me wrong. I just probably am not going to put Funeral for Yesterday on because it doesn't hit any of my feelings the way the previous albums did. Like, I liked the title track and I liked the chanting again that came in. Like, for serious, there's some noises that Kittie makes that, like, you know, Dan was just talking about this, like the death metal growl. You're here for it. Like, give me that drone, like, to play the drone forever. Like, yep. There's like a buzz feedback sound on Burning Bridges from the last album that does that to me. And there's something in Funeral for Yesterday that does that for me, but it's not the same vibe as the last 5 things we talked about.
Yeah, so, like, if you've ever followed me on Twitter or on our Discord server or
at
anything
Discuss Metal, Dan.
Okay, thanks for that, Joe. Yeah, so I like metal, guys. I like metal. I like hardcore. As you found out on an episode we did about a month ago, I also enjoy some rap every now and again. But in some Coheed. But this, I mean, I like money. I like. I like putting.
Hey, dude, can I have some money?
Yeah, I do. I get it, like 100%. I've told Joe since day one of doing this podcast, I cannot wait for my day to sell out. Like, I can't wait. Like, write me that check. What do you want me to say? I'll tell you the new Buck Cherry album's good. You know, like, whatever you need. Like, I'll do it.
Patreon.com/discussmetal.
Absolutely. Like, I'm all about it. I'm all about selling out. I get it 100%. I am not 14 anymore. I don't care about punk rock mindsets. I don't care about any of that crap. But what I do care about...
The views being expressed are those of Discuss Metal Dan and do not reflect those of Discuss Metal Joe.
But with Kittie, I mean... Like, can I be real for a second?
Please do.
Ladies and gentlemen, unpleasable metal fan. 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so you gals, you've always been, we are going to prove the world wrong. We're going to prove that a female metal band is not weak, can bring the riffs harder, just as hard, but I mean, honestly, let's be real, harder a lot of the times than some of these other bands. And then you put out this turd.
No.
And like, again, I get it because like you've been grinding for years. You have been grinding for years, trying to get noticed, trying to get bigger, but like you're not doing it, you know, to sign to like EMI or some crazy. EMI is a Christian music group. That was a dumb thing to say, but like you're not trying to sign to Epic or one of these huge labels. You know, you're putting this record out on X of Infamy Records, which is a record label that like I've probably never heard another record from ever. But like, you guys are still good enough. You're still Kittie. You're debuting on the Billboard Top 200. That's awesome. But you put this record out. Why? Where did the aggression come from? Or where did the aggression go? And the other thing is that like, I understand too that like in my 30s, I am not nearly as upset about things as I used to be. Like even a little bit, like stuff that used to just set me off. Like I don't even care anymore. But there's one thing that I always come back to, and that is whenever I feel like a band is not being honest with me.
Oh yeah.
And this record was that 100%. You are not being honest with me. Your lyrics might be fine. Like I didn't actually read the lyrics on this record because I don't have a physical copy of it, but it definitely felt to me like this was our grab. This is where we're going to get, we had some play on Octane or whatever it is, Sirius satellite radio. We had all of that. We want to keep that momentum going. How do we do that? Well, we put out more songs like those. This record had Funeral for Yesterday, the title track, and Breathe as the singles. When I listened to it, if you told me this was Kittie, I'd be like, are you sure it's not just like a side project from one of the members? Because the last time I checked, Kittie was a badass metal band.
See, okay, so here's directly from my notes, like just freeform thinking. I like the melodic singing stuff, but it is a little empty for me. Like it's the melodic stuff is good, but it's empty without the screaming and that like grit more far forward. Like I'm trying to make sure that I have notes from so like Slow Motion has stuff happening that's okay, but it's also like super canned and very predictable. Like it doesn't, I agree with what you're saying here that like it doesn't feel like they're being honest. Like there's definitely a genuineness, and I like being an art school graduate, I fucking hate that being a part of a critique. Like genuineness, be like, are you genuine? Like, but literally it just doesn't feel genuine.
It doesn't feel real. And not only does it not feel real, but like I'm not making the argument that if you want to write softer songs because that's what you feel,
right,
that's bad. Like you should do that. There's tons of bands that have put out significantly softer records than what we're used to, but it was honest, it was real. And dude, I don't feel that on this record. It's
literally like someone listened to that growlless edit of Into the Darkness and urged Kittie to make more stuff like that. Like they were like, oh, that the YA track, that one, make more stuff like that.
Right.
And it's just without the frustration and exasperation from the song itself, it's missing a key ingredient. A major regent is missing.
This is one time I can't justify the style change of the vocals. Overall, the music still sounds like we're playing metal songs influenced by our favorite bands. But this is 2007. I can't say that they stopped screaming because that stopped being popular, or they decided to play classic metal instead of hardcore and metalcore because As I Lay Dying wasn't popular that year, or I'll even go further. It's not like they sold out and joined a major record label and got turned into the Go-Go's of 2007. None of those things are happening on this record. So why did they make these decisions? I don't know. The only answer I can come up with is we didn't feel like screaming that day.
It literally, it goes back to that thing that I said about the Into the Darkness track. Like it sounds like somebody was trying to make a TV show or a consumable piece of media that had some hard-ish femme-backed music in the background. And it sounds, in my note, the direct note that I have in my notes is, I'm gonna get ripped for this, but this whole album sounds like a video game based around vampires. Like it's the soundtrack for vampire game music.
I'll go one step further.
Like Queen of the Damned Part 2,
I'll go one step further. This sounds like a fucking J-pop album.
Woo!
I wouldn't go that far, but it's just hollow. That's all it is. And like everybody does it eventually.
And I feel like Never Again like hit kind of hard, but I feel like it was just put in there specifically in the center of the album as like some sort of placeholder for the people who were looking for the harder things. Like they would think that like, oh, a shift is coming, that we're taking a journey on this album, and then the journey just doesn't fucking happen, and it still sounds packaged.
Yeah, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating because you've gotten something so far. And I remember commenting to somebody earlier this week. It was actually Lauren from the Roach Coach podcast. I was like, man, I'm really happy that we're doing Kittie this week because it's been a really enjoyable listen for me. And that was because I hadn't gotten to this record yet. And, it just...
Shots fired.
It's rough.
It's hard, man. It's hard.
It's really rough. And it's hard. It's not hard. It's supposed to be hard, but it's not.
It's not nearly as hard as it should.
Not even close. Not whenever this band was experimenting in death metal and black metal and incorporating those elements into their sound. And but I mean, it's not all gloom and doom. I mean, whenever they went into In the Black, it's like they heard this conversation and they're like, dude, they're right.
2009.
In the Black is like the we're sorry, we didn't mean to throw you out. We're gonna still throw some hard rock type songs in there. And we're still gonna do that a little bit because like maybe we gained some new fans from that record.
Well, it's literally like, oh well, we know that a lot of you are coming back for some things that we used to do. So here's just a little bit of almost that, so that you'll stay around for the next one too.
Absolutely, and it's hard because like it's a business. Being in a band is a business, and I get it. And I don't like driving all the way to California and then getting paid in pizza.
Right.
I love pizza, but like it doesn't go in my gas tank very well.
Bro, I am a professional artist who has never once taken a gig for exposure because it pisses me off.
Totally.
Like,
Congratulations, you figured it out early.
Yeah, they actually, when you spend $100,000 in art school, that's something that they make really clear to you, is that you should never have to pay to hang your art anywhere, and you should never have to pay for your own exposure.
Totally. It's a scam. And in music, it's even worse. Like, oh, go and play this showcase show, and it's a festival, and it's just a scam.
Yeah.
Give us $100, then we'll give you 20 tickets, and you can sell those for whatever you want. Blah 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 blah. We all know it's a scam. But like, I think with this record, it was definitely a step in the right direction. I hate the cover artwork for this record a lot. It's just the band standing there in like tight leather, and I'm just like, is this you? Is this you? Like, I don't know if this is you.
Is in the black a euphemism for wearing leather dresses?
I mean, it's possible. I mean, don't get me wrong. If they love wearing leather dresses, then more power to them. But I just don't get that impression from looking at that cover.
Now I have to look up this album artwork.
I'm just being real. Like, it's like, I mean, it's not a bad cover, but like they look pissed off. Like, and like that, I guess that's good for Kittie. Like, that's on brand.
They look pissed off. They sound pissed off. They're shrieking again.
I mean, it's part of what we want. It's what we want from them.
I mean, I guess at this point, I just want to see Kittie in corpse paint. Like like that's the next step. Like, let's go.
Oh, but see. Something that I loved about them is that, like, anytime you see them, like, yelling, like, I've watched several of, like, videos of them, like, playing at festivals or whatever, and it's so fucking cool to just see someone who looks a lot like me, like, just being fucking hard as shit. Like, that's... because like I don't know if this is like anybody's like first time, like the listeners like first time like looking into Kittie, but like the lead singers are not here to be like beautiful pretty things for you. They just are, but they're not objectifying themselves for the viewer. Like this is not an in this moment type of situation, right? Yeah. That's what I'm trying to say. Like that whole
I thought you were gonna say Butcher Babies for a second.
Hey, Butcher Babies is awesome. What are you talking about?
Butcher Babies is awesome, but they do that thing where they're like, we're not here to be objects, but then several years of their career, both of them would perform topless. Just saying.
They were basically wearing tape. Yeah, I remember.
Right. That. Whereas when you look up, if you look up old videos of Kittie playing festivals and stuff, it's like they're sweaty women in punk goth-esque clothes. Like they're just
which is not compatible with a 90-degree festival. Like, it's
right. Like, why are you wearing arm warmers right now, Morg? Take them off, girl.
Can you imagine being like Mushroomhead playing or Slipknot playing at a 90-degree festival? Like, I just don't get it. Like, how do you do that? But
look to the side of the stage. Once you see the giant fans, you will never unsee them. I just
felt like this. This cover just, I don't know. It seemed very cheese, very glam metal. It's
very cheese and very glam metal. But if you like look back to Bit, it's a similar kind of composition. This is a bad argument. Maybe it's I'm seeing it different in my head. No, I'm gonna stand by this because like compositionally, if you look at Spit, and then you look at the visual composition of the cover of In the Black.
Okay.
Those the hands on hips things, it's the same kind of style-esque attitude as they were like the arms only bend on Spit. I guess they have one where they're crossed. The picture I have for Spit is a much smaller resolution than the picture I have for In the Black.
Well, that's 2000 versus 2011 for you.
Yeah, but like it's definitely
2007.
At least they're not doing the thing where everybody's looking at a different place,
Yeah.
The album artwork is similar in that it is 4 strong-looking women looking straight at the camera, at the viewer, rather than, you know, the typical 90s grunge band thing where everybody is in the picture, but none of them are looking at the photographer. Like, nobody's looking at the viewer. They're all like looking off pensively, like the emo phase of the mid 2000s.
Is there an artistic root to that style? Because I know everybody did it, but where did that come from?
It's a compositional thing. Like, it should. Oh man, it should. If your subject is not looking at the viewer, it should be looking at something the viewer needs to look at. So if all of your bandmates are looking at each other, that would make sense. We don't need to talk about art theory. Sorry, guys.
Ladies and gentlemen, art theory by Isla.
So can we just say that they're all looking at a 10-speed bicycle? Because if they are, that makes me very happy.
Yeah, they're all looking directly at the purchaser of the album, like as opposed to the more like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like stock metal, like, you know, like good font, metal drawing, like definitely like it's other than their like live album, I feel like that's the only other time they're on their cover. And in both instances, all these women are looking out from the cover of this album straight at the viewer, and none of them are smiling.
But can we admit that it's pure cheese? Like,
oh yeah, it's cheese. It's definitely stating the statement so loud that we don't need to look, we could just listen.
Yeah. Like, I mean, stuff like that bothers me, and that's the only reason I make fun of the cover artwork. That's not really even something that we do that often, you know, on the show, is make fun of cover artwork. But every now and again, something will pop out at me, and I'm like, ugh.
You can blame the cover artwork stuff on me being a guest, because I'm a visual artist. You couldn't escape it.
Yeah. Well, and like that record, I guess, you know, to get back to talking about music, which is apparently what we do here, In the Black, it was definitely an apology record, but at the same time also had kind of that feeling of being an apology record where we're going to do the things that we know that you guys like, but like in a certain sense, isn't that like also kind of
But shouldn't
trite?
You like it too? Like, shouldn't...
Yeah, isn't that kind of trite? Like, I need to feel it, you know?
I think the art world side of things is like, you should only... The problem with being a sellout is before you become a sellout, the way you sell your work is you make work that you like. So there's a statistic where 1 out of every 16 people has the exact same taste as you. Like, right. Now we're not talking like taste buds, we're talking like aesthetics. Like, so 1 out of every 16 or 18 people has the exact same aesthetic preferences you do. Right. So if you only ever make work that you really like and you're really proud of, you are going to have an audience. The trip up comes when you start selling out and you start trying to make things that other people like. You're like, oh yeah, man, this is gonna sell. But it doesn't have any of you in it because you don't actually give a fuck. Yeah. Like, yeah. That's so hard. You know, because like that happens a lot, and like, you know, I know I'm not here to talk about me, I'm here to talk about Kittie, but like I deal with that a lot, like in the sense that like when we started podcasting or whatever, I talked about a lot of bands I listened to growing up, which happened to be bands that had religious affiliation, and so I became the Christian rock guy. Right. And before I knew it, I'm doing an interview with like Skillet or whatever, and like that dude was cool. Like, I don't have any problem talking to that dude, but like the thing is that like people like people expect me to have a certain care. Like, when we talk about these bands on the podcast, it's not really like a real thing that I think about, whether it's like a band that's from that industry or not. Like, I don't really care. Like, I'll talk about Demon Hunter and then I'll turn around and talk about Cannibal Corpse. Like, I don't care, you know? And but at the same time, I also realize that like if I were to turn around and gear the show towards just that, we might be more successful than we are now, you know, like in this like pseudo counterpoint, but would you be though? Because if you're putting that time into something that you're not actually putting your soul and heart into, like, machismo aside, like, is that thing
I don't have any of that, so it's fine.
Like, is the product that you're putting out going to actually be good if it's just a mechanical exercise as opposed to an actual expression?
Not even close. Yeah. You can tell if somebody's on or if they're not on. And it's to quote, Mr. Plinkett from Red Letter Media, you didn't notice it, but your brain did.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those, like, you might hear something and think that it's cool, and it might be cool. Like, I'm not discrediting the songs on this record. They're good songs. They are good songs. But they don't hit me the way the older material hit me. And that's not just me being an old man and being like, well, it never got any better than Master of Puppets in 1986. It's not that. It's just the human brain is very good at detecting sincerity.
Right. And it went to a different place that is still likable, but it may not be within my taste.
It is a cosmetic approximation.
Yes.
Of what we liked about Kittie.
Yeah, I can't stress enough to the listeners at home that I love Kittie. Like, I'm not trying to be.
I mean, after this week, I listened to Kittie all week, and I didn't have an experience for most of it, And again, when I say negative experience, I definitely didn't freak out and hide in my room and not talk to anybody for a week because of it, anything like that. But it was definitely.
Yeah. When I say I cried for 30 minutes this morning, I mean we're all in quarantine right now. Everything is stress. I'm producing a cartoon thing by myself, like a cartoon adjacent thing by myself, just the entire world. And somebody was really nice to me, and it just overwhelmed me. So I just took some time to emotionally do a thing. It's not like Kittie actually wrecked and destroyed me. It's just there were also world is just a whole shit ton of stimulus, and there was just too much.
They could have made it better, but they didn't on this record.
Yeah, that.
Yeah, it's fine. It's totally fine. I have to be self-sufficient enough to know that somebody's not going to be able to meet my needs at all times, especially when they don't even know me. That's a big factor to take into consideration.
Right, and that's the other thing I'm saying is even though it's not our Kittie album, it's somebody's favorite Kittie album, and the reason that person went back and listened to Spit is probably here in the black.
Yeah, totally. It just gets better as you go backwards, right? But
yeah.
I think and again, I don't think that this is bad, but I also just I'm being really harsh when you have to understand that these are normal people that are just trying to make a living doing this music thing, and it's really hard. It's really hard to do that. My heart's not in it all the time. Even for the dumb stuff I do. When I go to work in the morning, sometimes I'm like, dude, I'm gonna kill it today, and then other days I'm like, I'd like to just sit on my couch and sob and, have covers on and, just drink insane amounts of Keurig coffee, so I won't sleep. But it's, but they're just trying to make a record, and they're this many albums deep. They're 5 albums in, and it's to a certain point, it does become a job. And
yeah. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not necessarily my taste, but I'm also not mad.
I'm not upset with this one. Not nearly as much as the Funeral.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Not even a little bit. And
it's not my favorite, but I'm not mad at it. That's
this
Isla 2020.
Yeah, I'll give Kittie credit, and I don't feel like they ever majorly messed up. Like to the point, because I give every band a free pass for that one album.
Yeah.
Everybody puts out that one album. Metallica puts out Saint Anger.
Except for Cake.
Cake is
an exception to the rule.
Minimalism is a good benefit.
You know what? You can not like it all you want, but that does not make any of it bad, my friend.
I don't hate Cake. I love Cake, the band, and the food.
That's kind of my point. Is you can't actually hate Cake because they haven't ever made anything that's objectively bad.
That's true.
They've made a lot of things that are very similar and extremely same, but none of it's terrible on the ears.
Sure, and I feel that way about Kittie. Their worst album, because objectively, Kittie's worst album was an album that was very digestible for the masses.
Yes.
Is that really a bad thing? Because to me, a bad album is oh, you were trying to do this, but you didn't pull it off.
Right.
You know what I mean? But they absolutely pulled it off. And so I think that's what's interesting about a record called I Failed You.
Good segue.
It wasn't my best segue, but here we are.
2011.
I Failed You so if the last record was an I'm Sorry, this is no, seriously, guys, let's get back into it.
Yeah, let's get back together. Let's retouch on some things and still get the things that were present in. Oh God, I'm just really. I have to be looking at the list, or I can't
it's all
recall.
good.
let's touch on a couple of things from like Funeral for Yesterday, and maybe one or two things but like mostly we understand that we've done bad. Let's do this again. Let's start all over.
Yeah, and like it's not even that it was bad.
Yeah.
And this record is not bad at all. This was a really nice way to cap it all off for me, because I felt like the passion was there again. It takes a little while to build that passion back up. Like I said, as I get older, I care about less and less things.
Like, I feel like I Failed You was actually an easy listen for me. Like, how long is it? It's 36 minutes?
36 minutes, 37 minutes, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it was... I feel like I probably listened to this album more than 3 times because I just wasn't sure if I had actually like digested the entire thing, because it was really easy to have on and then get distracted with the thing that I was doing on the side.
Yeah, I mean, I won't say that the songs grabbed me and like made me stop what I was doing and take notice, but
I added it to my playlist of things, so I liked it.
Yeah, like I enjoyed it. I will be the first one to say I do not enjoy anything that has the words part 1 and part 2 in it. So like with the Empires song, but I thought that was cool. I mean, I do question how one's 2 minutes and 13 seconds long and the other one's 3 minutes and 40 or 3 minutes and 41 seconds long. Like, why not just make like a 5 or 6 minute song? You guys had no problem doing a 10-minute song on Oracle.
Yeah.
So why did this have to be a part 1 and part 2? Maybe that was like a label thing, but I was just kind of like, why do this? But it's fine. It's a minor gripe. I think the worst part is that like one thing that I've noticed is that Kittie has been selling.
Talking to the microphone.
One thing that I've noticed is that Kittie has been selling, or they've been debuting on Billboard Top 200 pretty much consistently since their inception. But they're always a little bit further down on the list. And, Oracle sold 19,000 copies in its debut week. You get to I Failed You and it's 3,000 copies. That's a drop off. That sucks.
I mean, I don't even know what the music industry is like anymore. Because I was going to say, most of the people that I talked to in the last couple of weeks that I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this thing. Do you remember when we used to hang out and listen to Kittie? Like, yeah. Most of those people fell off around until the end. And one of my friends actually said they only listen to Kittie when they're specifically in either a really mad mood or a very sad mood. So they don't get them in their rotation very much anymore. But like, I think they have all of their albums. They just don't ever they're like, yeah, I'm a fan and I like them and I saw them live once and it was really cool, but I only really listened to the early.
Well, with the exception of Present Company, I don't know anybody that says Kittie is their favorite band.
I mean, Kittie is not my favorite band, but Kittie is definitely one of my, it's in my top 20 at least. But we don't need to, all of your listeners would discredit any kind of knowledge that I might have accidentally dropped here if they knew the rest of my musical taste. I feel like.
Would you like me to tell them what at least 10 of them are?
Oh, let's see if you still know. You probably know some of them.
No. That's a different show.
I'm like, I think Joe and I were in band together and marching band together, kids at home.
We know some shit. Well, this record, if what you love about Kittie is the thrash metal gallop with the black metal shrieking, this record is all of that. In the Black had some of that, definitely more than Funeral for Yesterday, but again, Funeral for Yesterday is a different thing as far as I'm concerned. This is... You know how everybody thinks OTEP is the only female lead singer that can actually scream?
Yes, I do know about that.
Here's an example of why that's wrong.
She can't really, but okay.
There are several examples of better screamers, and I Failed You, to me, sounds like what we wanted in 2007. I don't know if the band was ready for that in 2007. I don't know why Funeral for Yesterday sounds so drastically different. But I'm so glad we have this one in 2011 because this sounds like the old Kittie from Oracle with more time and energy put into the actual riffs and the execution. Does not mean I don't love Oracle. Oracle is my favorite Kittie record, but there's a difference between that style of riffing and what they're doing here.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's very much a different thing. And I think that's fine for the most part because it still delivers.
one of the biggest differences between Funeral for Yesterday and that space between. In 2008, Trish Doan left because of an eating disorder.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is going to get a lot worse before it gets better. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like it would be a disservice to like not mention that probably had a lot to do with like trauma changes a person, trauma changes a band. So like that's going to be a factor in things to answer your question there, Joe. Like in 2012, they said that they announced that she wouldn't be returning, and there is no delicate way to say that Trish Doan died at the age of 31 because of an eating disorder. So that's the real life shit that's happening to Kittie during that time.
And haven't they been on an ongoing hiatus? It's never been the band is officially done or we're never going to make music again. It's just we don't know what we want to do next.
Yeah, I mean, they've done a few things here and there.
Morgan is the lead singer for another metal band, a melodic metal band called Carchaos.
Carchaos, yeah.
That one. That's as of like last year. They're awesome, by the way. I am going to be looking into them. I just didn't get them in while I was doing all this Kittie homework.
Sure. Kittie's going to consume your life for a week. And, I would say, with that trauma, I mean, and I understand it too, where you have somebody because she had basically, speaking about Trish, she had left the band, I guess in 2007, and then she came back. She was in the band from 2012 to 2017, and the idea behind it was just that like being with the band that long, like is it the same without her? Is it not? That's the hard call to make, and I can totally understand why you wouldn't want to move on, because like there's a certain sense of like you're going to always remember that every time you're playing. You're going to always remember that. You're going to always have those memories, and in certain cases bands have used that as fuel,
right,
to continue. But I think in a case like Kittie, it's probably for the best, because if I'm being completely honest, I do think that the band probably ran out of steam probably around album 3 musically. And that's not to say that their other songs were meaningless or anything like that, but I think it's best that they ended off whenever they did, because they are a band that was able to exist, that didn't suck.
Right.
Really at any point. They never made that like horrible mainstream grab. They never became a mockery of what they were. I mean, a couple of records were phoned in for sure. But
nothing was outright bad.
Right. It was never like, oh, turn this crap off.
Right.
And so I think in that sense, it was probably best that they ended it where they did, because I don't know where they would have gone from here.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like let me look back to that wiki. I feel like all of the members are obviously going to move on and join other projects now, because they're all very talented. Like, I don't think that's necessarily, I mean, that's how we get shit like the Foo Fighters, but like good things could happen too, something good could happen.
It could, yeah.
Final thoughts on Kittie. Isla.
I'm just gonna always love my angry woman music that makes me feel okay for being an angry woman.
Dan, what about you?
I have to admit, this was kind of a surprise for me. I wasn't like 100% sure if I was going to really get into it, because, I'm not necessarily the demographic for this. But on the same token, I found a lot to love. I also found stuff to criticize, and I think that's kind of the best way to look at it, because what I enjoyed about this was that I was able to criticize it objectively. There's kind of this stigma to, it's a female band, so they're just trying to be heavy like everybody else, and they're trying to prove themselves or whatever. And I didn't really get that impression from Kittie as much. I felt like they were just kind of trying to do a sincere thing, and they were able to do it for most of their career. So I mean, in the end, I think that they're a band you should definitely check out if you're worried about like, oh, I don't know if I'm like really into feminism that much, you know. I don't think that's really relevant. I think in the early albums it was definitely there, because I feel like if a band doesn't have a message, like, what are they even doing, you know? But I think with Kittie, they're a band you should check out if you haven't given them a chance. If you were worried about some kind of stigma or whatever, or you thought the music was going to be a certain way, this definitely did not play out the way that I thought it was going to, and that was what I enjoyed the most about it, is they continually surprised me throughout their career.
And start with Brackish. Oh my God, yeah. That's my other recommendation. Is if you like are looking for just listen, start with Brackish. Just start there and spiral.
I think Kittie is one of the heaviest bands from the early 2000s that nobody talks about. On that list of bands that writes seriously down-tuned rhythm guitar, riff-tastic, growly songs, nobody talks about Kittie. And I wonder why that is, because Spit, Oracle, Until the End, those are records that did exactly what they wanted to fucking do. They were exactly what they wanted to be. They were dirgy, they were heavy, and I loved them. When you get into the later part of the career, you start to see more of the influences that define Kittie's musical taste, but they don't ever give us a bubblegum bullshit pop music message. They write songs, they make sense, they're heavy as fuck, and you feel better when you're done listening to them. So if you're a fan of heavy music, if you're a fan of nu metal, and as cop-out as it is, if you need another example that anybody can write heavy, brutal music, go listen to Kittie. You're going to like what you hear. Dan, what's your album of the week?
My album of the week is Titans of Creation by Testament, that was sent to me by Nuclear Blast Records. I recently did an episode on Brutally Speaking where I interviewed Chuck Billy of Testament, and we talked about how he struggled with COVID-19. He's the only person I've interviewed that has actually had the virus. And it was a really good conversation. We dug into some stuff about like how they've been a band so long and yada yada yada. You guys can go listen to the interview; it's online. But yeah, Titans of Creation, Testament is the only way I could really explain what Testament means to me at this point in time is imagine if Metallica was still cool. That's Testament.
Is Hardwired not a good record?
It's not as good as Titans of Creation.
I guess we'll get into that at some point.
Yeah, let's do a Patreon or something. It's a great record, and I love it.
Isla, what about you?
I gotta go with Fiona Apple's new album, Fetch the Bolt Cutters.
Dude, she went hard on that one.
I have been stuck on Relay for like 4 days now. Like, I just keep repeating that track. And Under the Table, I feel like Under the Table was like written by a piece of me, probably.
Yeah.
Because like there's just this whole dynamic of like, kick me under the table all that you want, and I won't shut up. Like that's a whole Isla mood.
Yeah,
I do not disagree.
Lyrically, that record blew me away. I was really surprised. And like, it was a hard sell. Like when my buddy's like, "You need to listen to this record," and I was like, I guess. And but then I was like, "Oh, okay. I actually found some stuff that I really like about this record."
Right? It's like, but you do though. But you do need to listen to this record. I don't know.
You really do, yeah.
Fiona Apple is like one of my sleeper favorites. That's one on my top 25. If you guys have me back, each time I come back, I'll list another off of my top 25 or whatever. But Fiona Apple is definitely like a sleeper agent in my top 25 because she's never at the front of she's not usually at the front of my mind, but her whole discography is in my playlist.
So what I just picked up from that, did Isla just book herself for 25 additional episodes? 24, dude, sorry.
If you'll have me, like, what do I have but free time? And if people like to listen to me, I can talk forever.
No, this was great. I enjoyed having a perspective. You know, it's easy for me to just go in and be like, this record was great. This was garbage. This was great. This was garbage. You know, like it's second nature for me, but I like hearing different perspectives. I like being challenged a little bit in my thinking. And so you provided that for me, especially with picking Kittie. Cause like, I didn't know how that was going to play out. You know,
I find it really interesting that even though we don't have necessarily a circular Venn diagram of musical taste between the two of us. We still had very similar opinions and thoughts on pretty much every album from this discography.
Well, that's what I've been trying to tell people, is that my opinions are objectively true. You know, I should run for office. I feel like it'd be good at this point.
Bro, we're getting to be that age, you know, like it's time to run for office. What are you gonna do?
Absolutely. Let's go to Capitol Hill. I could use a campaign manager. So, you know, let's do this thing.
I'm not the right kind of charismatic, man. Like,
it's fine. It's fine. Just read what's on the teleprompter. You'll be fine.
She tried that and then she misplaced her notes.
Ignore all of your close held value and just go for fame. That's what matters, right?
For me, it's Deadsy, Commencement.
Yes.
I assure you that was not chosen ironically. That was really the album I was listening to all week.
72 minutes. You had to chill, dude, after all those Kittie records. They went for the throat, dude.
I had a lot of free time when people cancel plans, as you know.
Yeah, that's a good album. That puts me all the way back into freshman year. Anytime I put that album on, I'm like, boop.
Yep.
Well, Isla, since you mentioned freshman year, I need you to help me one time. Star Wars and Jaws.
Battle plan.
Hey, Isla, I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking about Kittie with us. This was a lot of fun. We definitely would love to have you on to talk about something else sometime soon. And but can you give us a preview or let the listeners know where they can find your work, I Am Artworks and Die Lucky Podcast?
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a great time catching up with you guys. So you can find Die Lucky on Instagram at Die Lucky. On Twitter at Die Lucky Podcast. And if you want to find the episodes on YouTube, you can search Die Lucky Campaign. And episode 1 is definitely up when this comes up. God, I hope episode 2 is out. So episode 1 is called Cursed and Called, and episode 2 is Prophecy NB, as a shout out to old Buffy and the non-binary gender identification that we tend to really hard embrace on Die Lucky. So yeah.
Hey now, hush.
also Buffy shout out. But yeah, so definitely check out episode 1, Cursed and Called, and episode 2, Prophecy NB. If it's not up by the time this is up, it is going to be up so soon. Yeah.
Take us out, DFT.
Have you ever been listening to this podcast and thought to yourself, why are they talking about this band? Like Kittie? I don't want to talk about Kittie. I want you guys to talk about insert name of band you want us to talk about here. I can't read your mind. I don't know what band you want us to talk about. So I made a list. If you want to add to that list, you can do that in a lot of ways. You can reach out to us on Facebook at facebook.com/discography discussion. You can send us a tweet at discussmetal or at discussmetaljoe or discussmetaldan, depending on who you like more. Let's be honest, it's me. And you can send us an email at danandjoeshow@gmail.com. We have a Discord server. People are talking on there all the time, sometimes in the middle of the night, from all over the world. It's incredible. I love it. There's a link in our show notes that'll take you right to our Discord server, and you can leave your band recommendations there. You can talk to us. You can ask us what I had for breakfast, but I probably won't remember if it's been a couple of hours. So yeah, there's all kinds of ways you can reach out to us. You can always leave us a comment on things. You can listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave us a review, whatever you guys got to do to keep this train rolling. We really appreciate you guys, and we will see you next time.
Thanks.
And on that note, this has been episode 169 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at discussmetal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion. And please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.
Give me your money.
Contact, commission, and check out Isla's portfolio at iamartworks.com.